Over the years, I've featured quite a few products and technologies that have died off within my lifetime. For example, I've got a collection of pocket televisions which are now little more than paperweight since they switched off the analog TV signal. So I thought I should get around to trying the thing out that I'm going to show you today whilst I still can. I'm going to be taking some photos with film, not just any film though, it's a film that's due to be discontinued soon. And I thought I should take those photos with some unusual cameras from the late 80s and early 90s. Let's get on with it. Over the last year or so, you might have noticed all the song and dance about Kodak bringing back their Ektachrome film, a film that they discontinued back in 2012. They've certainly managed to get this news into various gadget, tech and photography blogs and websites, although the fact is that the film still isn't on the market at the time I'm recording this, but apparently it's imminent. But you won't hear as much about the films that have been discontinued over the last couple of years. But there's been a bit of a massacre, especially over at Fujifilm, where they've got a bit of a penchant for killing off films in the last couple of years, but they're not the only ones. And apparently the latest of the Fujifilm range to find its neck on the chopping block is their Acros 100. This is a very well-respected black and white film that up until now had been available in 120 and 35mm sizes. Now this film seems to be one of those ones that everyone recommends when I've been looking for a black and white film. Whatever website I go on, somebody will say, oh, get the Acros 100. Well, that was until recently, of course, but I've managed to get hold of some Acros 100 on Amazon. They're not expensive, and I bought two films back in June 2018 for just £8 or thereabouts a piece. So these are 35mm 36 exposure films, and the two boxes that came in the post had sequential serial numbers, but I noticed it says you have to get them developed by November 18, so this looks like it's the end of the Amazon stocks as well. Now the cameras that I'm going to be using to take these films with are a couple of unusual cameras, one from 1988, one from 1990. This is the one from 88 from Olympus. It's called their O Product. Now this camera was a limited edition of 20,000, 10,000 of which made their way outside Japan, and the chap that got this one back in 1988 kept it in its box unused all that time up until now. Well, I think a camera should be used rather than kept in a box, so I'm going to get it straight out of here and have a good look at it. It's been out once before to have the photos taken for it to be sold on eBay, but I'm going to be the first person to use this. Now this camera provided the impetus for this whole video existing, because once I'd seen a photo of one of these online, I decided that I should get hold of one, and then the rest of the things all fell into place with a film that's been discontinued soon, etc. Mine is 16,133 out of 20,000. 20,000 to me doesn't sound like that much of a limited edition. However, apparently they sold these out immediately, and they are now quite desired by camera collectors. Inside the back of here at the bottom you can see we've got an inscription which says, a new concept in product design, Olympus O Product, functional imperatives moulded to artistic form, a camera shaped with simple lines, elegant contours. And if that all sounds a little bit Johnny Ive, well, it kind of is. There's a Japanese equivalent, a designer, and it's all his work. I'll put information about that in the video description text box so you can read up on it a little bit more. You can see it runs on two AAAs. We've got a tripod hole on the bottom. These sockets on the right hand side are what attaches up to the flash. Now, unlike the rest of the camera body, which is made out of metal, the flash is made out of plastic that's been coloured silver, which is a little bit of a disappointment, but you know, that's how they made it, so that's what it is. I can't really do anything about that. As you can see, it connects up to the side here, and once it's all together, it does have a very appealing look, or should I say form, to the whole thing. To open the lens cap, you just move this lever on the front, which is a very satisfying thing to push down. Get the light on top of the flash there to tell you when the flash is ready. Press the shutter button on the front to take a picture. Very simple camera, it's just got a shutter button really. Oh, we've got a self-timer as well. If we hold that down on the top and then press the shutter button, you can see the light on the front there. So this is the point when you put it up on a wall or on a tripod. Step back, wait for that light to flash, start your grin, and then you get your nice picture. So let's put some film in this. We'll put the first of these two rolls in here. It's a while since I've put a 35mm film in a camera. Put it in there, click it, It winds it on automatically, there's nothing you have to do, gets it onto the position where it says a number 1 in that little window on the front there, and it's ready to go. Let's just have a look at the documentation that came with it though. I want to show you this. This is a particularly nice instruction booklet. Again, we've got these line drawings on here, all very much to do with designers and this kind of form and function and stuff. But I like these pencil type drawings on the inside here as well. These are very pleasing to look at. There's one that I've noticed there though over on the right hand side, and it's the strap. I didn't realise there was supposed to be a strap. I hope that's in the box somewhere because I didn't notice it before. Yeah, there it is down the side, so that's good news. In fact, a very nice strap as well. I'm not sure whether it's leather or not, this, or some sort of simulated thing, but it's got this writing on either side. Very well made, and I like these connectors at the end here, how they just go over the end there, and just, you've got to put a bit of force into them to click them into position. But yeah, I wish all cameras had connectors like that on the side. That's very good. You have to take the flash off on this side to get the strap on there, and you can see it looks a little bit odd, sort of bent around the flash. But still, I do like the way that those connectors are attached to the side, and overall it just got a very pleasing look to this. So this camera came out in 1988, and despite its vintage, there's still a lot online about it. You'd think this was some kind of special camera, the way that there's blog articles and there's lots of photos and things about it, and the fact that it costs quite a bit of money as well. Mine was a good buy, but if you look on eBay, you can see there's some pretty expensive cameras there. So you're thinking, well, this must be a really high-end camera. But you might have noticed earlier on, it kind of gave itself away on the inside. Even though the body's metal on the outside, we've got this plastic interior. And that's because the mechanism of this camera comes straight out of a budget point and shoot, known in the US as the Olympus Infinity Junior, or elsewhere in the world as the AF10. And you can pick one of those up nowadays on eBay for next to nothing. So in a way, this camera is similar to those kit cars that you see that are supposed to look like a Ferrari or a Lamborghini or a Porsche, but underneath it's really just an old Volkswagen Beetle. But still, I do find this a very attractive design. I'll be looking forward to seeing how well it performs in a moment. But I also bought another retro look camera, the Minolta Prod-20s. Yes, that's another unusual name. Now this again seems to follow the same idea. It's a limited edition camera meant to look old-fashioned, especially the packaging, as you can see here. The instruction booklet's a little bit more normal, but we've got this nice little photo frame in here which contains pictures of two people I don't know, but fortunately I don't have to put up with those photos. You can swap those out with your own later on. I noticed they've used black and white photos in there as well, so they're thinking along the same lines as myself. If you're using retro cameras, then shoot some black and white film. But yeah, this seems like a bit of a takeoff of the Olympus idea. This one came out in 1990, and the reason I wanted to feature this one is because it's a little bit cheaper to get hold of this camera if you're looking for a retro look 35mm point and shoot. Again, like the other camera, quite a lot of metal used in this one's construction. We've got a metal lens cap on the front here. The body at the top and bottom is metal. It's got this nice finish on it as well, this textured finish. The lever on the front there is for the self-timer. A pretty standard layout overall. And again, just like the other camera, simple to use. We've just got the counter there. This dial around the shutter button goes between the L position, which is locked, or the dot, which means it's like live, and then you press the button in the middle, of course, to take a photo. Center viewfinder on the back there, tripod hole on the bottom. This hasn't been peeled off before, so I've done that, but I think this one might have been used because I've noticed a little dint on here, unless it's just an ex-demo one that someone was a little bit rough with. It looks pretty new in the box. Anyway, it doesn't look like it's had much use at all. The bottom of this comes off to reveal the compartment for the battery, and that is a weird type of battery that I definitely don't have in the house. I've ordered one of those, and you'll see by magic that will appear in the video in a couple of minutes, but, well, less than a minute, I think. But that's the magic of editing. It took about 2 days to get here. The film goes in the back, of course, there, just all very standard. Again, it's just a basic camera. There's nothing to these cameras at all. Anyone can use them. You just point them at something and press the button on the top. No skill required, but just very nice looking little camera this. Now, I mentioned that this one was a bit cheaper than the other one to get hold of. And I think that's because it wasn't as limited edition as the Olympus, and it doesn't seem to be as desired by collectors either. There aren't really many articles online about the Prod-20s, and as a result the prices on eBay are roughly about half, or perhaps a little bit less than half, than the price of the Olympus O product. But just like the Olympus camera, this one is based on a simple point and shoot, the Freedom 202. So if you go looking for the prices of those on eBay, again you find that they cost next to nothing in comparison to the price of buying the Prod-20s. So just like the O product, you're paying for the looks, but not the performance. Oh look, the battery's turned up. I've never bought one of these style of battery before. I don't know how common they are, but there didn't seem to be many on Amazon, so I hope they don't discontinue them. I like the way it slides in. There's only one way round you can put it as well. I think that's a good idea. I'd imagine that'll let you take lots of photos as well. Anyway, let's try the camera now, check it's working, move it into the live position, press the shutter button. The flash fired straight away there, and again. So yeah, looks good. Let's put the self timer on. So you move that lever down and then press the shutter button. Now, this is a bit weird. The light just stays on until it takes the picture. So there's no flash before the picture of the red light. So you don't know when the picture's going to happen. So you can imagine people smiling for ages and then getting the picture taken just as they're about to lose interest. So there'll be lots of sort of pictures of people with grimaces on using that self-timer, I'd imagine. But let's put the other film into here. Just the same as the other one. You drop it over the spool at the bottom there. Make sure it reaches across to the left-hand side on the sprocket holes, and then close the door and it'll just automatically wind it on to the first position. Now this one wound on really quickly compared to the other one. It just went straight to number one, so a little bit of a different mechanism in there. Seems to be a little bit more efficient. Oh, you can see the number of mine on the top there, 34,655. So I don't know how many that went up to, but that's already considerably more than the 20,000 they made of the Olympus O product. Now, whilst they look quite a bit different to one another, in reality both of these cameras have very similar operation. They're both fully automatic point and shoots with automatic focus, automatic flash, automatic rewind when you get to the end of the film. I suppose in that regard, this one could be considered to be ever so slightly more sophisticated because you've got a button to rewind the film if you want to do it early, but it will automatically do it at the end. And also the flash fires on both of these whenever it thinks that it needs to. With this one, I suppose you could take the flash off or unplug it if you didn't want to use it. One thing I don't like about this, personal thing this is, I'm not a fan of lens caps. I know professional cameras come with lens caps. I'm not a fan of them, so that's just my thing. I don't like having to take a lens cap off when I want to take a picture. I'd much prefer just pushing this little lever down like this. Now for the next thing, I've zoomed you in a little bit because I want to show you another thing that I prefer about the Olympus camera. Just have a listen to this mechanism. It's very satisfying. Now, I'll show you the same thing with the other camera. You know, that's not as satisfying a noise. No. And then finally, the third thing is the looks. I mean, I don't know which one you prefer, but I much prefer the look of this. And this is the only camera that I've walked around with for the last 20 years or so when someone has actually stopped me to ask me about the camera I'm using. It's just that unusual. A chap in the hotel I was staying at was inquiring about it, and he's not even into photos himself. He's only ever taken photos with a smartphone. And when I explained what I was doing, that I was taking film with two different cameras, and showed him the other one, he kind of looked at the other one and went, yeah, and then went back to this one. The reason being, I think, is because this camera looks a lot like a lot of modern day cameras. This design, whilst looking retro at the time it came out, now a lot of cameras with interchangeable lenses, or even ones with fixed lenses, are looking like this kind of retro design. So whilst in 1990 or so this was like some really retro weird camera and everyone would stop you and say, "Wow, you're using an old camera, that's cool," when all the other cameras look like rounded black pieces of plastic, this design, which doesn't really fit into any time, but it is reminiscent of those kind of cameras that people used to carry around in the 1930s and take pictures of boxes and things, have the separate flash up here with a bulb in it that would go pop. This design hasn't aged. It still looks kind of retro futuristic, and that's the thing that I like most about it. So this is my preference of the two cameras, but which one of them took the best photos. That's perhaps the most important thing because that's the one I'm going to be using going forward. So let's have a look at the photos. Now, I carried both of these cameras around at the same time, alternating between them, so I got similar photos with each one. I then got the films developed at the same place at the same time, and I also asked them to scan the negatives onto a CD, which just cost me a couple of pounds extra, so that I could easily incorporate those photos into this video. Those scans were done at 2992 by 2000 resolution, and they're JPEGs. Now let's have a look at the gallery from each camera. I'm not going to tell you which one's which to start with though. Right, so out of those two sets of photos, I definitely prefer the ones from camera A, but I also prefer the Olympus camera to look at and to use. So, which of the two cameras was camera A? Yeah, that's a result for me. My favourite camera took my favourite photos of the two, but let me explain why I prefer the photos from that camera. These films were one serial number apart from one another. They were taken to the same developers and developed at the same time, and yet there's a noticeable difference between the performance of both cameras with those films. And you might have noticed it before, it's the fact that the Olympus produces lighter photos with better grayscales, whereas the Minolta has a habit of producing photos that are just a little bit too dark and also crushing down the grayscale, so things look black rather than shades of grey, and therefore you lose detail in the picture in the darker areas. Here's an example of one where I got the framing a little bit different between the two, but just look there, it looks a lot blacker on the Minolta. And this one, now this was the very first picture I took, so that might be a little bit too light on the Olympus, whereas on the Minolta it does look a little bit better darker. That was one of the exceptions. And the Minolta can produce good quality pictures, there's no doubt about that. It's just there are quite a few times when, like this statue here, I'm losing the detail, or you can't even see what's going on inside that donuts van there. Or, you know, it just makes things too dark more often than not, whereas these photos I'm showing you now from the Olympus, there's some really good grayscale in here. You get to see a lot of detail. Both cameras produce very sharp images. I was very impressed with that. To say these are quite low resolution scans, I suppose, as well. Very happy with the results overall. Produced some really nice pictures with both cameras, but overall I prefer the ones from the Olympus. The viewfinders on both cameras enabled very accurate framing of the images. The only time I noticed the autofocus getting tripped up was on this photo here, where it's focused on the background rather than the padlocks in the foreground, but I actually prefer the way it's chosen to focus this. I think it looks better. Both cameras didn't produce any bad photos. I got 36 out of the Minolta and 38 out of the Olympus. I suppose the only one that could be classed as unusable would be this one where I've got my finger in front of the lens at the bottom, but that's entirely my fault. The flashes on both work really well. This is a flash photo from the Olympus, nice and sharp and clear, and moving on to the Minolta, it seems that it might get the exposure a little bit better when it's firing the flash. So there's a few things that I've discovered while I've been doing this. The first one is that I found it really enjoyable. Much more enjoyable than if I'd just gone to the same places and taken some photos with my smartphone. I don't know exactly what it is about it. I think it might be because I was taking some black and white photos, which makes you think about things a little bit differently. You wouldn't, for example, take a picture of your lunch with a black and white photo. Yeah, I suppose you might do, but it wouldn't look very appealing to other people. You tend to look for things that are kind of a little bit unusual, things that would be colourful and would look unusual or interesting as a black and white photo. Structural type things, unusual angles and things like that. It just makes you think a little bit differently about photography. One thing I had to consider though when I started this is, did I have anywhere that could develop black and white film locally? And I don't really. I've got one that's 45 minutes drive away. So that's the one that I've taken these photos to in the centre of Liverpool to get them developed, but they did a good job with them. But yeah, that's something to consider. But all I'd say is, if you do find an old camera in a drawer, most families will have an old 35mm camera shoved away somewhere. And if you don't, you could buy one for next to nothing in most sort of charity shops and things. Maybe just stick a black and white film in it, go out and take some photos, get them developed, and it won't cost you all that much just for that little experiment. And you might find at the end of it that you've got a new hobby that will get you out to places and get you looking at things in a different way. Certainly did for me anyway. But that's it for the moment. As always, thanks for watching. To me, it seems that over the last few years there's been a desire to make things a little bit more difficult to do to get more enjoyment out of them. Let me explain what I mean. For example, if I wanted to play a particular album on my smartphone, it's just a matter of picking up and tapping on the screen. So why are sales of vinyl on the increase? After all, a record takes up a lot of storage room, it costs quite a bit of money. Albums are split over multiple discs, this one's on 2, and that's 4 sides, so you'll have to get up and change the music every 15 minutes or so, and clean it as well, look after it. And yet there are people that would prefer to do that than listen to music on their smartphone, and those people will also have a smartphone. They've made a conscious decision to make things more complicated because they find that more enjoyable in the long run. You'd sit down and listen to a record. You can't just wander around the house while it's on. You need to just take a minute and enjoy it, and maybe that's part of what it's all about. So this is a long-winded way of me saying that perhaps the same thing is true of taking photos on film. Once you've got the film to the end, take it somewhere or send it off, wait. Wait is the big thing here. Wait until those photos come back and then see what you took. But that adds an extra level of enjoyment to it in a way. It's a bit of a mystery. You've took some photos, what are they going to look like? And you'll find out when you get the results back.